Huma, Gurinder, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about Viceroy's house in English and Partition 1947 in Hindi, just to make it clear that they're not two different films.
Yes.
It's the same movie. I wanted to ask you, Gurinder, that this comes from a very personal space. It's a family history that you're putting, not specific family history that you're putting up on screen, but your family was impacted directly by the partition.
Yeah.
Did this impact on your choices as a director?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, the whole reason I made the film in the first place was because it was directly personal. And growing up in England, I was always aware that I didn't have an ancestral homeland. You know, other people would have their villages, their gowns or whatever, but I didn't. And also my family were still quite traumatized by events. You know, my uncles and aunts were young children at the time, so they still talked about it. And also I then had a sort of disconnect with India because my Punjabi is very different. I speak that Punjabi.
You speak Tate.
I speak Rawalpindi Punjabi, you know, or Jhelum as opposed to Jalandhar. And also culturally, you know, my extended group, which is the sort of Patwar Bradri, as they say, you know, of the foothills of the Himalayas, you know, it's a particular cultural group. And so, yeah, we very much, it's part of all of our collective memory. So I think that even though I live in England, Partition is very much alive for people, NRIs, you know, all over the world.
Huma, for you, this was an opportunity to work with incredible international actors. I thought some of the performances were so wonderful. What did you take away as an actor?
Well, tons of things. Like you said, you know, the experience of working with an international cast where everybody just comes with so much of amazing work that you've grown up watching literally.
Were you an X-Files fan?
Well, of course I was.
Did
but
you
I was a bigger Downton Abbey fan, to be very honest. And I wish I had more scenes with Hugh Bonneville, but Gurinder ensured that never happened. But of course, the opportunity to work with her as well, because I saw Bhaju on the beach in college, and Swara Bhaskar's mother, Ira Bhaskar, was my professor, and she introduced me to Gurinder's work, and I was like, wow, you know, this is an amazing filmmaker, a female filmmaker, making such interesting films in the UK that me, as like a young girl in college in Delhi University, was watching and getting influenced by. So I never thought I'd get a chance to work with her. So, and I think, you know, I've at least tried to pick projects, try to pick scripts that I always try and push my boundaries in whatever way. And I thought that this was one film, of course, you know, which would say something very, very relevant as well, apart from, you know, of course, working in an international project, an English language film. It was also something I felt politically this film was saying something extremely relevant, which is something, you know, I also try and look for, I don't know, that other layer in scripts when I try and pick my work. So this was like all the boxes were ticked for me.
But tell me, this film, since its premiere at the Berlin Film Festival earlier in the year, has incited some very strong responses. You know, it started with the Fatima Bhutto piece where she said it betrays a colonized imagination. The book is, of course, based on In the Shadow of the Great Game, you know, by Narendra Singh Sarla, whose wife then said that, well, I'm glad he didn't see this film, it would have given him a heart attack. When you embarked on this, did you have any inkling that it would do this?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, partition is a very sensitive subject. The history of Pakistan is very sensitive in terms of who gets to tell that history. So, frankly, I was expecting more than what we got, to be honest with you. And I think that Mrs. Sarila's piece is really rather quite petty, and there's personal reasons why she did that. It was largely to do with the fact that the rights of the book came with the adage that her son had to be given a role in the movie, and then she wasn't satisfied with that.
With what he got.
With what he got. So that was all very petty kind of stuff, but it's fine, you know. The thing is that I think that, you know, when you make a film about a subject that everybody has been affected by, or a lot of people have been affected by, you know, everyone brings to bear all kinds of feelings themselves, frustrations, angers, you know, upset. And I think that I understand that. I understand anger, and I've always been, I think because I started off as a journalist myself, I've always been really okay about any kind of criticism. I mean, if you go back and look at Bend It Like Beckham, you know, the most universally loved film around the world, and you read the New York Times review of it, you'll be shocked at what, you know, he said. He said it wasn't an authentic portrayal of British Indians living in Britain today or something like that, you know. And I was
And you're like, really? I
was
wouldn't
like,
know that.
I was like, hold on, it's my story, it's me, you know, my parents, what are you talking about? So, you know, often I think, you know, critics often, you know, they bring their own, you know, they have to bring their own selves and therefore their own ideas and their own interpretations and how they would have told the story. And that's perfectly, that's part of the process. So I'm not at all offended by any criticism. What I try and do is understand where the person's coming from. And I think what was really great actually about Fatima Bhutto's piece is the amount of debate it generated, because it came out in the morning, on Friday morning when the film opened. By the afternoon, when people had been seeing the film finally, a lot of people then started criticizing her and saying, well, I don't know which film you've seen, but we've seen a totally different film to the film that you've described. So she did misrepresent the film. But you know what? She's coming from a place where she doesn't want to handle the fact, I guess, that her country was born out of the pain and suffering of my grandmother, you know. So how do you tell that story to someone like her, you know, who is going to write that history in a particular way? But the interesting thing was, I always was aware that nationalism would come to play, you know, which is why it's very much a British film. It's a British Punjabi film, because that's what I am. But an Indian would have made a different film here, and a Pakistani would have made a different film, and a Gora over there would have made a different film. All would have made different films, but mine is that unique position.
Huma, did you plan for this? I mean, Gurinder's saying she knew that it was going to come. Were you taken aback?
Well, we talk about it all the time. You know, she'd keep calling and saying, okay, so what is the political climate of the country and what's going on? And we would talk about it because, yes, it is a sensitive film. You know, it is something, you know, and world over today, you open the newspaper, there's all sorts of conversations about identity happening, and which is taking a very militant term. So this militant nationalism, it's not just in India, it's world over. It's almost like contagious in that sense. So
Sadly,
yes, sadly, yeah, but it's true, you know, and which is why also I think the film is getting such strong reactions, positive and negative. This is a film that gets a 4 and a 1.5 rating, you know, which is baffling. So, but for us, it's
but
amazing.
I love that. I love that.
It's amazing. Because at least it's making you think, it's making you question, it's stirring you up, and that's the important thing, right? You don't want to make a film that is just insipid, that has no conversation, you know, point to it. And it's about the partition. I mean, of course, it's been the single most historic event, the largest man-made migration in the subcontinent. I mean, it's bound to have certain kind of reactions, you know, and understandably so.
The fact that it is a new version of history. And, you know, Ian Jack, again, in The Guardian, said that this is fake history, which is as dangerous as fake news. So what is the responsibility of artists portraying history?
I think there is a bigger question here on who gets to write history, you know, and there's a fantastic quote by Winston Churchill. History will be kind to me because I will write it, you know. And that's the point. People like that. Who gets someone has to be so full of themselves in order to write a quote like that. You know, he never thought he would ever be challenged, you know, and that's, I think, our point. I mean, I didn't set out to make a film that was, you know, rah, 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 I'm going to take this on, I'm going to take that on. I set out to make a film that explained why my family suffered. What was the reason? Because my mum always said that in Rawalpindi, she would say, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, ਪਿਆਰ ਨਾਲ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਈਦ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਠਿਆਈ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਗੁਰਪੁਰਬ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਠਿਆਈ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, and ਜਦੋਂ ਦੀਵਾਲੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਸੀ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਮਨਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ। ਤਾਂ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਚਾਨਕ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ, you know, ਇਹ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਕਰਤੂਤਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ, she says, and ਕੋਈ ਕਾਲਾ ਜਾਦੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੇ, ਜੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ,
ਨਜ਼ਰ ਲੱਗੀ,
ਅਚਾਨਕ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ overnight. So she has always said that. So in a way, that's part of my trajectory. Why would my mum say that? You know, that's a historical, you know, point. So I was really exploring that. And I think that to be honest, I think everybody knows that behind Partition there was some kind of skullduggery, but no one knows exactly what it is. No one could put their finger on what it was, you know. And then people just left it because it's too painful to deal with.
You said just now, Gurinder, that it's too painful. That's why nobody went into looking at what really played out in the shadow of the Great Game. Do you think, is that one reason why Indian cinema has really not dealt with Partition? You know, you've had the Garam Hawa, you've had the Tamas, 70 years and maybe 4 films? 3 films?
We've had Gadar and...
You've had Gadar, you've had Pinjar.
Yeah.
But very handful. You know, it's not like World War II where every 2 years...
Or the Holocaust.
Or the Holocaust.
Exactly.
You know, it's not a recurring sort of
We
theme
don't like
that...
to talk about it, no? It's so painful, like grandparents, we just don't want to acknowledge, and healing is such an important part of just being able to talk and share and do all of that. And I don't think, maybe it's a cultural thing, I don't know, you know, maybe people just don't want to acknowledge the fact and think that's going to go away. But the fact of the matter is that because of not acknowledging it or not making enough movies or songs or just talking about it culturally, it's created more conflict in the region.
Yeah, shouldn't there be some sort of artistic catharsis, so to speak?
Yeah,
You put it all out there.
Well, you have it in literature. I mean, there's a lot of literature.
Right, but not in cinema.
And poetry, yeah. Well, look, it's a sensitive subject, you know. I mean, ma'am, panga la liya, some would say, you know. But then I'm a sickly.
Very achhi kat rahi thi.
Exactly. You know, I could have made another bloody Bendy like Beckham too, you know. I did this. But I think that it is because I'm a sickly, and it is because it affects me directly.
You end the film, of course, you know, it's a story that is so difficult and has so many sort of layers to it that you can't end it happily, quote unquote. So you end it with you know.
Don't give away the ending.
No, I won't. But tell me.
With a happy ending.
I wouldn't say it's happy, but I think it was important. It's hopeful. Exactly.
Yeah.
One had to have some hope. But funnily enough, when we started making the film, or started writing the script, Obama was president. There was no Brexit. There was no Syrian refugee crisis. You know, the world was a different place. During the course of making the film and then releasing the film, you know, you have Trump, you have, you know, the rise of hate crime, you know, across the world. And so all that affected us in making the film. And that's why I think a lot of people around the world have appreciated the film, particularly in Germany, particularly Europe, is because it's very resonant for today.
Well, the important thing also is just to add to what she was saying, you know, I think what one must remember that this is a film that was made in English language. It's a film about the partition, but it's an English language film, you know, which looks at the story of what happened in the partition, takes it to a wider audience outside, an audience that possibly does not really connect emotionally or otherwise. I mean, the people in the UK who have no idea that there was something called the British Raj or that the partition ever happened. And that's a story that is something that is worth sharing and repeating. And also, like what Gurinder said to me while we were filming, you know, she said, you know, I'm pretending to make this British film about the Viceroy, but actually the story I'm saying is about the Indians. So I'm really sort of, you know, subverting the genre to actually talk about what really is. It looks like this English film with the Viceroy coming to India, but actually it's something else.
But those are the tactics that someone like me has to employ working in the West. Because as soon as I say I want to make a film that has Indian lead characters in it, the commerciality goes right down. Of course. So that's why there's no one else. I mean, 25 years ago I made Bargee on the Beach. Now with Viceroy's House 25 years later, then I was the first Indian woman to make a feature film in Britain. I'm still the only Indian woman making a living, making feature films. There's just me.
Come to India, we have more female directors here.
That's right.
We do have more female directors.
True. You absolutely do.
Yes.
You do.
And they get to make really big commercial films.
They do. They do.
But that's the context in which one has to understand this film, that it's always a struggle, you know, to make anything in the West with an Indian character. You know, they do make films like Marigold and stuff, you know, obviously, you know, and that was a film that I was offered, you know, but I read it and I said, okay, but what are the Indian characters? I don't understand. What are they doing? I don't get it. And So I passed on it, you know. So I think that there is still this perception of India being exotic and or poor.
Well, it was called the exotic.
or the slums, you know, so your slums or your exotic, you know. But to have a kind of film which has, you know, Punjabis from 1947, Bengalis from 1947, who are articulating
Muslims,
Sikhs, Hindus articulating their fears in a British film actually is, you know, I would never have imagined this film would ever get made, you know, a few years back, never. But, you know, you just have to keep pushing the boundaries, and I did this for the memory of my grandmother and also my aunt who died of starvation during that time. And really that's what I hold on to, is shining a light on why they suffered and why they died. And that's it, in a way. It's as simple as that. You hold on to that fact of why suffering happened during that time, and everything else just pales into insignificance for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this video, subscribe to Film Companion. We will bring you all that's new and exciting in the movies.